My dear brothers and sisters, you and I know certain people in this life who've built for themselves such a reputation that they would honestly prefer to die as opposed to failing in a promise they have given. If such is the status of a promise in the eyes of some people, what then is the status of a promise in the eyes of Allah Himself, who has given Himself names like Al-Haq, the truth, and Al-Barr, the ever-doer of good, and Al-Kareem, the most generous? What would He do when He has made a promise? Look at what He says in the Quran answering this question. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُخْلِفُ الْمِيعَادِ. Allah never fails in His promise. And Allah, He said, إِنَّمَا تُوعَدُونَ لَصَادِقٌ. What you have been promised is true. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, إِنَّمَا تُوعَدُونَ لَوَاقِعٌ. Surely what you have been promised must come to pass. It will happen. Focus on this emphasis on how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala focuses on how He will never fail any of His promises. Now a question. Why is it that people break their promises to begin with? It's usually because either the promise itself was a lie to begin with, or number two, because of an inability later on. They have an inability to act upon that promise and fulfill that promise. And this is precisely why Allah never fails in His promise. Because first of all, Allah is above lying. وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ قِيلًا. Who is truer than Allah in speech? And therefore, lying about the promise is not a possibility with Allah. And number two, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Allah is able to do all things. And therefore, being unable to act upon the promise is also not a possibility. And this is why Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, وَمَنْ أَوْفَى بِعَهْدِهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ. Who is truer to His covenant than Allah? And the implied answer is, nobody is. With that said, let us take a look at some of the promises of Allah, all of which must come and will come to pass if the conditions are met. Promise number one, Allah Azza wa Jal has promised those who practice Islam inwardly and outwardly a happy and pleasant and peaceful life. Allahu Akbar. The 21st century we live in, it teaches you everything except how to be a happy and pleased and content and satisfied individual. And obviously there are many variables contributing to happiness, but according to Muslims there is one key variable. And if it is not there, you will never find that gem called happiness. Where is it to be found? Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَآمَنُوا بِمَا نُزِّلَ عَلَى مُحَمَّدٍ وَهُوَ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ كَفَّرَ عَنْهُمْ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ وَأَصْلَحَ بَالَهُمْ. And those who believe, listen, Allah says that those who believe and they do righteous deeds, and they believe in that which was sent to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it is the truth from their Lord, what will Allah do for them? Look at the end of the ayah. كَفَّرَ عَنْهُمْ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ. He will erase their sins. وَأَصْلَحَ بَالَهُمْ. He will improve their state. He will grant them happiness. That is a promise from Allah. Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. Whoever does good, whether male or female, whilst being a believer, we will most certainly make him live a happy life. Whoever believes that happiness can be found in other than the obedience of Allah has shown the worst of thought and the worst of expectation regarding Allah. Take it as a rule in your life, dear brother, dear sister. When your soul fatigues, when it feels anything contradictory to happiness, this is because of how close or far you are to Allah. And this is the reason why Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he said to his servant as they were traveling, looking for a man by the name of Al-Khadr or Al-Khidr. Musa began to feel tired, and he said to his servant, bring us our morning meal. لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِن سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. that we've suffered so much in our journey, we've suffered so much fatigue. And so commenting on the statement of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, Musa only felt tired the moment he had passed the area he was commanded to go to. Listen, Musa was commanded by Allah to meet a particular man in a particular destination. Musa, however, didn't realize that he went past the point Allah had commanded him to. And it was at that point where he crossed, where Allah wanted him to go, that he began to feel fatigue. He began to feel tired. Therefore, dear brother, dear sister, say the same thing to your soul. If you have fatigued, if you feel tired, if you feel lazy or lethargic, this is a sign that you have crossed Allah's limits somewhere. You are standing in a place Allah doesn't want you to stand. And that is promise number one. As for promise number two, Allah has promised those who live a life of Islamic practice, love within the hearts of people. Where is that promise found? It is found in Surah Maryam, where Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَيَجْعَلُ لَهُمُ الرَّحْمَنُ وُدًّا. Surely those who believe, Allah said, and they do good deeds, Allah will bring about for them love. But what does this love refer to, you may ask? Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, the companion, he gives an explanation. He says, مَحَبَّةً فِي النَّاسِ فِي الدُّنْيَا. It means that people in the world, they will love you. He said that people in the world, they will love this individual. And the words of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam establish this same meaning. He would say in a beautiful narration, ما من عبد إلا له صيت في السماء فإذا كان صيته في السماء حسنا وضع في الأرض وإذا كان صيته في السماء سيئا وضع في الأرض. He would say that there isn't any person except that they have a reputation in the heavens, a reputation in the heavens. And therefore, if his reputation in the heaven is good, it will be placed on the earth as the same. And if his reputation in the heavens is a bad one, then it will also be placed on the earth. Therefore, what people are saying about you today is a reflection of what you are being spoken about above. The fact that you are for the most part loved by the Muslims is a sign, it's not accidental. See this, insha'Allah, as an exciting sign of where you stand with Allah Azza wa Jal. And the opposite, by the way, is just as true. And that is why Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu an, he said a beautiful statement. He said, ما من الناس عبد يعمل خيرا ولا يعمل شرا إلا كساه الله رداء عمله. He said, any person who does good or evil, Allah will clothe him with the garment of his deed. Very fascinating. Allah will clothe him or her with the attire of their doings. So in other words, what you are insisting upon behind closed doors, whether it is a good habit that you have or an evil, treacherous habit that you have, it is only going to be a matter of time before Allah makes it public. That is promise number two. Promise number three, Allah Almighty has promised that Islam will remain till the Day of Judgment. Listen to this prophecy. This might be a prophecy many of you have not heard perhaps. Our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ زَوَالِيَ الْأَرْضِ فَرَأَيْتُ مَشَارِقَهَا وَمَغَارِبَهَا. Allah drew the ends of the world for me to see, and I have seen its eastern and western ends. وَإِنَّ أُمَّتِي سَيَبْلُغُ مُلْكُهَا مَا زُوِيَ لِي مِنْهَا. And I saw that the kingdom of my ummah will reach those ends that I saw. And then he said, وَأُعْطِيتُ الْكَنْزَيْنِ الْأَحْمَرُ وَالْأَبْيَضُ. And Allah has also given me the two treasures, the red and the white. And these are in reference to places that Rasulullah's kingdom would eventually encompass. And then he said, وَإِنِّي سَأَلْتُ رَبِّي لِأُمَّتِي أَنْ لَا يُهْلِكَهَا بِسَنَةٍ بِعَامَةٍ وَأَنْ لَا يُسَلِّطَ عَلَيْهِمْ عَدُوًا مِنْ سِوَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ فَيَسْتَبِيحَ بَيْضَتَهُمْ. And I begged my Lord for my ummah. Look, he's making dua for us, that it should not be destroyed because of famine, because of a lack of food. And I begged my Lord, number 2, that it is never to be dominated by an enemy who is not from it, who would then eradicate them. And now Allah Azza wa Jal is going to respond. He is going to answer. Did He answer? Did He accept the dua or not? وَإِنَّ رَبِّي قال, He says, and Allah my Lord, He said, Ya Muhammad, إِنِّي إِذَا قَضَيْتُ قَضَاءً فَإِنَّهُ لَا يُرَدْ. He said, O Muhammad, whenever I make a decision, I, Allah, make a decision, then it cannot be changed. وَإِنِّي أَعْطَيْتُكَ لِأُمَّتِكَ أَلَّا أُهْلِكَهُمْ بِسَنَةٍ بِعَامَةٍ. And so I have granted for you that your ummah will never be destroyed by means of famine, lack of food. Subhanallah, what about the second dua? Listen to the answer. وَأَلَّا أُصَلِّطَ عَلَيْهِمْ عَدُوًّا مِّن سِوَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ فَيَسْتَبِيحُ بَيْضَتَهُمْ وَلَوْ اجْتَمَعَ عَلَيْهِمْ مَنْ بِأَقْطَارِهَا. And I have decreed that you will never be dominated, you and the Muslims, by an enemy who would not be from amongst them, even if the entire world were to join hands with the intention of doing so. Allahu Akbar. This is a promise which could not have come at a better time for our bruised and beaten blue ummah. A promise from Allah that is fulfilled in so many ways. You may say to me, how will Allah ensure that this religion remains till Yawmul Qiyamah? I will say to you, consider these several mechanisms. First of all, by the frequent sending of revivalists, those people with the title of Mujaddid. As our Prophet ﷺ told us that Allah Almighty sends at the end of each 100 years someone who will revive the religion. Revivalists, Mujaddid. May Allah make you and I from amongst them. And that's one way that the religion will be preserved till the end of time. What else, you may say to me? Number 2, by Allah taking it upon Himself to preserve the Qur'an. As Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Allah said, we were the ones who revealed the Qur'an and we shall be its guardians. It shall never change, and it can never change in its meaning nor in its wording. A promise from Allah. Number 3, a third mechanism, by protecting a small group of Muslims who will remain upon the truth even if the masses go astray. The Prophet ﷺ would speak about this. He said, there will always be a group from my ummah which will be prevalent upon the truth, and they will not be harmed by those who let them down till the command of Allah comes to pass, i.e. till Yawmul Qiyamah comes. There will always be a group firm upon the truth even if the masses become corrupt and astray. Therefore the Muslim who believes in these promises will not despair, regardless of how great the hostility that Muslims and Islam face may be, because that is the promise of Allah and He never fails in His promise. That is promise number what? Promise number 3. Promise number 4 of 6. The resurrection must happen. The resurrection must happen. It must come to pass. The day, the last day, the final day, the day which Allah called it Al-Yawm Al-Maw'ud, the promised day. In Surah Al-Buruj, Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْمَوْعُودِ. Allah said, I swear by the sky that is containing great magnificent stars, and I swear by the promised day, and that day is the day of judgment. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he would say in explanation of this ayah, Allah has promised the inhabitants of the heavens and the inhabitants of the earth that they will all meet each other on that day. And that is precisely why Allah told us to say in the dua, in the Quran, Surah Al-Imran, رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ جَامِعُ النَّاسِ لِيَوْمٍ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ إِنَّكَ لَا تُخْلِفُ الْمِيعَادِ. Our Lord, surely you will gather mankind all together, and surely Allah never breaks His promise. And therefore, because of this, dear brother, dear sister, because of this promise of the resurrection and how it has to happen, no matter what we do, we have to be on edge. We have to always be in a state of preparation. always in a state of repentance, having realized that what is ahead of us is a very long journey, and that journey begins with death. That journey begins with death. You only start after you die. That is promise number 4, that the resurrection is on its way and it is bound to happen. Promise number 5, one of my favorite ones, my favorite promise. Allah has promised those who courageously reject a sinful practice, a bad habit, with that which is better. Allah will give you something better. This is a promise which provides so much strength and peace and solace and reassurance, particularly to the young Muslim man or the young Muslim women in university or not in university, who may be struggling with a specific bad habit, a specific sin, a particular doing that they know it will distance them from Allah. They know it will harm them in this life and the next. Abu Qatada and Abu Dama, they said that we came to a Bedouin man and we asked him, did you hear any knowledge from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And the Bedouin man said, yes, I heard him say, إِنَّكَ لَن تَدَعَ شَيْئًا لِلَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ إِلَّا بَدَّلَكَ اللَّهُ بِهِ مَا هُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنْهِ. He said that I heard him say, there isn't anything that you give up for the sake of Allah except that He will replace you with something better. What is that? That is a promise, dear brother, dear sister. And Allah Almighty never fails in His promise. Now don't get me wrong, such a replacement may be delivered to you in an obvious fashion. For example, someone has a haram relationship, a prohibited relationship, and they cut it outright. And Allah replaces that with a beautiful, pure and halal relationship. Or someone may be involved in an impermissible business transaction and they give it up, and Allah gives them a better business opportunity. Or, for example, it could come in the form of an unobvious way, such as health for you or your children, or a righteous spouse, or some kind of a blessing, or an affliction is averted away from you. Allah may replace you with something better in an obvious way or in an unobvious way, but the conclusion is He will replace it in a way which is best for you, and it will be at the best time for you, tailored for you. So make the courageous decision from this moment onwards to make amends to those bad habits, to those relationships and those secret doings that you know need evicting from your life, dear brother, dear sister. And then realize that the better replacement from Allah, the second you give up that sin, the better replacement has already been dispatched. It's already on your way. It may come now, it may come a day after, it may come a year after, it may come Yawm al-Qiyamah, but have trust that it is coming, and it is the promise of Allah that it will come. And may Allah give us the strength to do that. That is promise number 5. And our 6th and final promise is the following. The promise that the outcome of sabr, the outcome of patience, will be Jannah and nothing else. The outcome of patience will be Jannah, paradise. And that is patience, by the way, in all 3 of its forms. As-sabr ala al-maqdur, patience upon whatever is decreed for you. Was-sabru ala al-ma'mur, and patience upon the obligations of Islam. Was-sabru ala al-mahdhur, and patience upon the haram, patience upon avoiding that which is haram in Islam. All of these levels, they require your patience and your struggle, but it will eventually drive you to Jannah. Why? Because Allah Almighty promised that. You might ask me, Brother Subhan, where has Allah Almighty promised us that the outcome will be Jannah? Let us read the ayah and soothe our hearts. In Surah Furqan, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, لَهُمْ فِيهَا مَا يَشَاءُونَ خَالِدِينَ كَانَ عَلَى رَبِّكَ وَعْدًا مَسْئُولًا. Allah said, everything that they wished for, they will have it in Jannah. They will be there forever. And this is a promise binding upon your Lord that must be fulfilled. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, لكن الذين اتقوا ربهم لهم غرف من فوقها غرف مبنية تجري من تحتها الأنهار وعد الله لا يخلف الله الميعاد. Allah mentions that those who have feared their Lord and were conscious of Him, they will be given high, lofty mansions, above which are higher mansions. And there will be gardens gardens beneath them which will flow. And then Allah said, this is the promise of Allah which He does not break. And Allah Azza wa Jal, He said, وَتَتَلَقَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ هَذَا يَوْمُكُمُ الَّذِي كُنْتُمْ تُوعَدُونَ. The angels will meet them on that day, saying to them, this is the day which you have been promised. The promise from Allah. I believe that if you are a firm believer in just this promise, that the outcome of your sabr will be Jannah, this is enough for you to get rid of any bad habit in your life. For example, anyone who is going through a struggle in regards to desire for the opposite gender, whether male or female, I say to you, remember the perfection of what awaits us in Jannah. That will help us overcome it. And that is why our Prophet ﷺ, he described the men and the women in Jannah. He didn't tell us for no reason. The Prophet ﷺ, he first of all describes the men of Jannah. Listen carefully, he said, men in Jannah are given strength, the strength of 100 men in respect to eating, in respect to drinking, in respect to desire, in respect to marital relations. They are jurda, free from all bodily hair. They are murda, they have no beards, no bodily hair. Their eyes are anointed with kuhul, full of vitality and vibrancy and energy. These are the men of Jannah, created in the form of our father Adam alayhi salam. And as for the women of Jannah, the Prophet ﷺ said, if a woman from paradise was to overlook into the people of the world, the beauty of her face would illuminate everything between the heavens and the earth, and she would fill it with her beautiful scent. And then he said, the garment which she wears on her head for beauty, it is better than the world and everything within it. If that is just the garment on her head, what can be said about the splendor and magnificence of the individual beneath that garment? Imagine. So leave the haram desires, dear brother, dear sister. Its pleasure only lasts for a moment. And then what's after that? Pain, regret, suffering. And then the consequence of that action could perhaps be Jahannam, the fire. And who can handle the punishment of Jahannam? The person with the lightest punishment in the hellfire will be a person who is made to stand on two hot coals, and his dimagh, his brain will boil like a cauldron. That is the lightest punishment. What is the state of the person who fully enters the hellfire? And dear brother, dear sister, know that if you attained every single desire in this dunya, you indulged in every single haram desire, the desires of money, of lust, of women, of smoking, shisha, vaping, listening to music, ignoring your salah, eating haram, looking at haram, listening to haram, if you did all of that, one dip in the hellfire, tunsa kulla na'im, you will forget every single happiness, every single joy, any mata' you had, you will forget all of it. Just one dip. And if you were deprived of all the enjoyments of the dunya, if you were a beggar your whole life, you really tried but Allah didn't give you that much, one dip in Jannah, you will forget any hardship ever touched you. You will say, hardship never touched me before. This is the promise of Allah, dear brother, dear sister. Realize that the destruction to Allah, the destruction of the whole world is lesser than Him failing in any one of His promises that He had made. Allah therefore has made us many promises, and you have heard them today. We mentioned 6. Firstly, Allah promised that those who follow His guidance and do good will experience true happiness and contentment. That was number 1. Pay attention. Number 2, Allah promised that if you live by Islam, He will place love for you within the hearts of people. Promise number 3, Islam will remain strong and protected until Yawmul Qiyamah, until the Day of Judgment. Number 4, Allah has promised that the Day of Resurrection will come to pass. There is no doubt in its occurrence. Number 5, if you leave something sinful for His sake, He will replace it with something better. And number 6, the promise of Allah that the outcome of patience is Jannah. you have heard these promises, and so it is upon me and you to meet the conditions of these promises with patience. So be confident in the promises of your Lord and watch how life unfolds its blessings to you. And we ask Allah to make us from those people who take His promises seriously and act upon them in the best of ways. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.